and welcome to our podcast. You've joined Healing for the Heart, and this is the podcast People Just Like Us, where we take the time to talk, as it says, to people just like us. I'm absolutely delighted today that we have Ross on the podcast. I'm going to let Ross introduce himself and tell you a wee bit about himself and how he came to find out about Healing for the Heart. So Ross, over to you.
Thanks, Shona. It's really good to be here. And just even with asking that question itself, I'm probably going to derail us from the get-go.
That's all right.
Just because last night I was on a coaching call, and one of the things that they kind of sparked at the end was, if someone was to ask you who you are and take away your name, your identity in terms of what you do as a profession, or even your family and the things that you have tied to, what would you respond?
What an interesting question.
Yeah.
So how would you respond?
I was like, I don't even know. It's like one of those in terms of, would you talk about your values? Do you talk about the sort of things you're interested in? Your passions? What makes you you? And I feel like for me, I'm probably someone that's seeing so much changes. I feel like I turn up as various different people in the space of one day alone, So I'll give the kind of surface level answer that everybody else does. So in terms of me, so I work in project management in the civil service, been dabbling in terms of over the last couple of months with a business partner doing a little bit of interior design work. But I don't think any of that really is me, when I talk about that. And I think probably quite a lot of people can resonate behind that, you hide behind almost a label of what almost is portrayed to be successful or appears to be good. And I mention that only from the basis of, it kind of from a mental point of view and your thoughts, it's just people can be stuck in jobs or things that they're not happy with, but then, when someone asks them the question, they feel almost a sense of pride when they talk about the label, how much they earn or whatever it may be, but it doesn't really kind of speak to them or a calling. So I suppose for me, it's probably giving you a little bit of an insight as to how I'm operating, how I'm thinking. So over the last year or so, I've done probably quite a lot of work on trying to understand what I'm passionate about and not being scared to try new things and delve a little bit deeper into knowing myself and building that relationship with myself, as well as try and distill and share a little bit about what I'm learning as I go along. So hence why I thought we've met recently through a BNI, a business referral network, and you're talking about everything mental health, and obviously everyone's got their own mental health, just like we all have our own physical health. So I thought, you know what, if I'm learning things about me and I can see improvements and things that I'm making in my life, then there might be just one little thing that I could share that resonates with somebody else that they might want to explore.
Totally. So what go back to that coaching question, because now I'm interested in that coaching question. So back to that question that you were talking about from last night. So what makes you tick? What gets you up in the morning?
So I feel, and I think we touched on this just before we kind of came on, like I've been in the last couple of weeks feeling like I'm in this sort of recalibration phase as to, okay, I was in a period for so long of thriving, really creating quite a lot in different areas of my life. And then, as I say, you can't appreciate the highs without the lows, and you can't always be on that and that escalator up. So I feel like just now I'm at that point where I'm going back to basics, getting the, one of my coaches would always say, no one's ever better than the old classic basics, So I think for me, it's about what do I get in a week? What do I value? I value, in a day, injecting a lot of fun, in wee small elements, small challenges, keeping it varied. I'm not one of these people that think that every day should be the same and that you should fall into that fallacy of a sense of security given the fact that you're in routine, because nothing's really the same. And I think there was something that I quite interesting that I heard recently was that obviously I've known that you have anywhere between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day, but someone said that 90% of them are actually the same as yesterday. So it kind of means that you're almost like living continuously in the past and you're going through that kind of Groundhog Day. And so it might sound quite bizarre, but one thing that I've heard recently is about try to keep yourself alert, like even just take a different path to go to work. How do you make your bed in the morning? Do you always stay in the same routine? Do you always go for that coffee? I mean, if something was to be knocked out of balance, so much that we do on autopilot through our life, I'm quite fascinated by keeping myself alert and keeping it varied. And what drives me just now is learning more about what makes me tick and where I can find more about how my mind works, how I can make my, cultivate a life that I want. Using my mind, that's kind of something I'm really interested in, and also really creating really good experiences and memories with those that are around me.
I think that just to go back to that thing you were saying about changing it up a bit, so if I do this every day, can I do something different? I think that what that makes me think of is about building resilience, because sometimes that's what sticks us, isn't it? When we're doing the same thing and things are predictable, and then something happens and it wasn't what we thought was going to happen, and very often that actually has a big impact on us, and like how do we bounce back from that? But I wonder if there's something in what you're saying, and I haven't thought about this before, but I wonder if there's something in what you're saying about being able to build resilience by changing it up every so often, so that you don't get into that place where this is what you expect, this is predictable, and therefore if it doesn't happen, there's a big problem.
Yeah. So what you're kind of really talking about there is evolution, and as a species you need to evolve to adapt, and adapt to be able to survive. So it's survival, it really is, because we feed off so much of what we're surrounded by in our environment. And I think for me, that's something that I've been very conscious and woke up to, or awakened to, is the fact that I've made changes in my life as to what I do, where I put my time, my emphasis, because even down to what I listen, what I consume, the conversations that I have, I think it's so important that we're always feeding ourselves, and we need to be able to make sure that we're taking ourselves and learning from those that are either further down a path that you want to go on, or that are just making you feel good about yourself. I think and just keeping life a little bit varied. Why would you want to be miserable? Why would you want to wake up and just feel like you're just living for a paycheck to then to no avail? Why do we not have goals and ambitions and things that make us feel alive? Too many of us are scared to actually even admit to ourselves what they are, or see them as possibilities. And
those goals don't need to be big massive things. They don't need to be hugely life-changing things, but they're goals that we set that once we've actually achieved them, it gives us the impetus almost to move on to the next one, doesn't it?
I think yes and no, because partly what I kind of discover is that so many of us, and I've said this to so many people before, I believe that we achieve so much on a regular basis without even realising it, and we don't even acknowledge ourselves for it. And we actually overlook, because look at where we are probably in our lives just now. There's probably loads of things that you've achieved that you once upon a time would have thought would have been out of your reach, and I'm the same, in terms of simple things where I am just now, in terms of the job that I do, that just now I kind of really am saying that I don't have much passion for it, doesn't excite me. But 5-10 years ago, I would be thinking, oh my god, that's so out of reach, the place that I'm staying in, the things that I'm doing, and the change I've made in my life. And I think we're continually achieving things, but we just don't acknowledge ourselves or kind of build up that sense of success or gratitude. And so we kind of are a little bit jaded in our view.
And there's something intentional about that as well, isn't there? Because I know, so as a staff team in here, we've been thinking a lot about gratitude, and so we pause once a week. We come together as a staff team for a lunch once a week, and we talk about the things that we're grateful for that week. And we've actually started to say, I'm really grateful that it wasn't just this, but it was actually this. So I'm really grateful that we didn't just get through 10 phone calls this morning, but we actually got through 20. So that whole thing of it could have been this, but actually it was even more than that, and that's been really encouraging for staff, because it's about pausing and doing exactly what you're saying.
And what's been your rationale or reasons for doing that? What's the driver?
Because it's really easy to get focused. It's what you focus on, your attention, what you focus on grows. Where you put your attention, it actually grows. And so therefore, if we are constantly being bogged down with all the things that aren't happening, all the things that we can't shift, all the things that are difficult to move, then actually they become the thing that dominates our thinking, and that pulls you down. And so therefore, if we can switch our perspective, even just for half an hour in the week, onto the things that have actually gone really well, then we start to change the perspective, and the thing that we focus on then grows.
It's interesting because, again, I'm really fascinated by all this, and there's more things that I start delving into in terms of how it links with the, I was never considered myself a sciencey person into physics and things, but yeah, I'm a firm believer where attention goes, energy flows, definitely. Yeah. And it's all about your vibrational state, because every thought that you have has a vibration, because everything, at its root, they kind of talk about being made up of energy and consciousness. Even us as individuals, all material things broken down as energy. And so if everything's kind of oscillating on their own frequency, you need to think about when you're having conversations with people, what thoughts are coming out. And in the West, generally, we've got quite a strong negativity bias. Yeah. We bond over the negative. If there's 10 good things, we'll all, and one bad, out of them, you'll focus on the bad. And if you ask people, generally how they feeling today, it's in Scotland, it's always not bad, it's never great, it's never good, but it's not bad, but not good. And it's one of them that I think we need to be conscious of the language that we're using. How does it make us feel? And generally, it's interesting because one thing that I've noticed is that I do a lot of work on myself. Gratitude, big thing for me, and I think because it's a high vibration, and they talk about this in many different places, but the reason you can only ever think one thought at a time, and you can't think a positive thought and a negative thought. As much as, a negative thought might come, at lightning speed right after. I mean, come on, we're having those 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, so ultimately you are. But gratitude being quite a high frequency, because when you're in that state, you cannot be thinking lack or, scarcity consciousness. Yeah. And it's one thing that I've noticed that in terms of, I'm a firm believer that we generally create our own reality and our own existence. And I mean that on probably quite a deeper level from what, defies almost like our five senses. I kind of mean that on the level of, where we are, all the kind of things that have happened to us are of our own making, indirectly, for not necessarily that we are to blame for them, because a lot of horrible things happen to a lot of people. But in one level, because of our thoughts and the way our thinking is, because of our programming, I believe, as part of our subconscious that we've learned from quite a young age, we almost have beliefs in us that are working faulty for us. And because we've got that belief system and those thoughts, and because it goes back to that feeling where I was saying that those thoughts have a vibration and a frequency like radio, you're effectively drawing more of that into your life, out with what you can effectively see beyond your senses. So if you're thinking lack, scarcity, and it's something that I didn't think about or hear until recently, because I'll do all that work in terms of affirmations, visualizations, but then I thought, I'm putting out, they kind of think about those sort of things as being like the signal out to the universe or the world or whatever it is what you desire. But in terms of attracting it to you, you need to kind of resonate with the emotion of it. So by that I mean, if I'm wanting money, for instance, and I put out, and I have all the visualizations of what I'm doing, where I'm spending and things, but if it's coming from a feeling or emotion of lack, scarcity, or that's the belief, then that frequency's out of kilter. It's like radio. I can't connect to, smooth radio if I'm trying to, on the frequency of Clyde, it's just like, it's imbalanced. I'm not attracting it. I know what I want, putting intention out there, but I'm not attracting it. Yeah. And so I need to kind of get into that right frequency. And if I've got programming where I'm looking at something through the wrong lens, and that's all I'm seeing or I'm focusing on, then is it any wonder that my life and the results that I've got in my health, my finances, my relationships are what they are? I need to look at what are my beliefs, what are my
And so that would fit with a lot of the stuff that we would look at here. So we would always be asking the question, so what's happened to you? So that's a lot of the adverse childhood experience stuff for folks. Now I know there's a layer on there that you're bringing in about frequency, and I'm fascinated by that stuff, just been delving into that over the last couple of weeks. But there's something about how things happen to us, or things gather round about us, and in actual fact very often we're so busy trying to sort the thing that we don't actually look at the thing behind it. So we're so busy trying to sort on this level to try and get this into line, to try and get the house, to get the car, to get the whatever, to sort the job, to sort the kids, so we're trying to do all this behavioural stuff up here, which you can do for a period of time, but eventually whatever the underlying thing is, whether that's a belief system or a thought a core belief or something that's happened or something that we're carrying even in our physiology, unless we can actually address the thing that's behind that, then this, as you say, all it is you're putting that stuff out there, but in actual fact there's a block in terms of how you make real change.
Yeah. I think they talk about everyone having that almost like temperature gauge as to, you've got, your own, I don't know if it's your comfort zone or whatever it may be, or just like if you make a lot of money but you've got a scarcity consciousness about money, then you'll eventually bring yourself back to the same level of income that you had before, because your bank balance might have went up, but your mindset and your attitude and things towards that has not, evolved. And there's just so much there that you could unpack and talk about. I mean, I don't even claim to be an expert on it. I'm quite fascinated the more I learn and hear about it. I'm thinking, God, how can I make that work for me in my life that I can change? But yeah, you're right. There's so much that we've got deep rooted that, come from, I mean, you see the world through your lens and your view and your experiences, and I see it through mine. And no two people have that same experience or that same upbringing. So what you think might be quite easy to do, I might think really challenging, or think, oh God, you can't get ahead in that area. Whereas, it's just, and it's all reality. It's all the same.
Absolutely. But what neuroscience is telling us now is that neuroplasticity is a real thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so we knew that we've known that for decades, but 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we thought that unless you actually could do something by the time you were kind of 15, 16, maybe 14, 15, unless you could actually start to break some of those neural pathways that you didn't want to be there and make new ones, then you were stuffed basically. But now they've discovered that neuroplasticity is there right up until the time you take your last breath, kind of thing. So, and
it sounds like such a technical, scary word that people are just like, well, what does that even mean? It's just basically being able to change how you, I suppose, your belief systems, how you think. It's like teaching an old dog new tricks.
Absolutely.
Effectively. It's saying it can be done. That's what it's
right.
saying.
Absolutely.
And I think I've been introduced by a lot of this through the last 12 to 18 months plus probably now, by doing a programme through John Kehoe as a trainer. He talks about a programme called Mind Power, and it's all about creating the life that you want, getting really skills and techniques that can actually help you manifest your reality. And you probably heard of like the Bob Proctor and things, so he's probably a bit more well known that works in that space when people talk about the law of attraction, vibration. One of the calls that I was on last night for the very first time was his kind of like prodigy that's taken over from him to get a bit of insight, because I'm always just looking and interested to find out how others and what techniques they use. Super Genius is another one that I use through Ryan Pinnock that runs that. He's South African, based down in London. It's just about trying to, the way in which I look at life and the world is just like completely changed. In a different spectrum. And that way, it's one thing that I'm having to probably remind myself of in recent weeks, because I feel like I've fallen away from quite a lot of that belief and that consciousness, because I've kind of went into my old ways of thinking. And it is it's a discipline, it's a training. Just like you need to physically train your body for your physical well-being, you're only as good as your most recent behaviours and habits. That's what one of my coaches would always tell me. And it's not until you have something, you lose it, then you think, oh, right, the penny drops. They can tell me all this thing, but I need to experience it and learn it for myself. And it's the same as your mental practice. How many of us go in mentally each day and actually train or think about the thoughts that we're thinking? That's part of what that mind power is. It's actually taking that bit of time in a day, 15, 20 minutes, to actually make the unconscious conscious. Think about the thoughts that you're wanting to think, because they have an impact on the life that you're leading,
Yeah, and there's something about being able to do that actually gives you the ability to make different choices, which is really good. Sometimes we would talk about driving into a field, so if you've driven into the same field for years and years and years, then you've made big ruts in the ground. And so when you try and drive into the other field, the car automatically wants to go into the field that it's been going into for a long time. And it actually takes quite a lot of effort to make the new ruts to get into the new field. But once you've made them, you can actually, it becomes easier every time you go into the new field, because you create another depth of the rut, and you take yourself away from the other field, which is just another way to think about it. So I think you've touched on this already, but how are you looking after your mental and emotional health?
So I think there's nothing new here that you probably wouldn't hear from a lot of people, or maybe there is. So, I mean, there's that real mind-body connection, so that's why people will really profess about exercise and how that helps them, definitely. There's lots of things that I've done and introduced this year and across as a habit, and I think it takes, like, the best part of a good 2 to 3 months at least to kind of distill something as a habit, Definitely. So, focusing solely on the kind of like mental and emotional, so I mean, stress release and that for me as I train, I like to go to the gym. Definitely, like a lot of people say they eat well. I do value certainly sleep. I do think sleep is a real, you need to let your system flush everything. This is something that I believe that if a lot of people just devalue, they don't understand the impacts it'll have on their ability in later life, to their thoughts, and how they operate. But cold water therapy is one that I do in like 30-40 seconds a day, after cold shower. Again, a lot, and again, it's a mental game that. It's not just a physical thing. It's mental resilience to be able to kind of do something like that and put yourself through being uncomfortable. That's another thing. Something that I was really a big advocate was trying to look for situations in which I could make myself just marginally uncomfortable. Having that conversation with someone, doing something that I think, oh God, I don't really want to do that. Building a little bit of faith in myself and doing something that doesn't necessarily make me feel safe, because that's what my ego or my subconscious want me to do. It's what me to kind of do the things that I've always done. Think the way that I've always think because it's what it knows. It's what keeps you safe. So I think that's a big thing. Meditation, again, still finding my feet with that more and more, but I'm getting into it and I'm actually understanding probably on deeper levels why you would do it, in terms of actually trying to disconnect from your present, talk about being more present, but I'm starting to learn and look at that in a different way in terms of it's not being present, like enjoying the moment all the time, like who you're having it with. It's actually possibly even in a different sense that people look at it, disconnecting entirely from your life as your body, effectively, your past, your present, so that you're almost in that field where it's time is limitless almost, so that you can be in a more creative zone. So I think that's something that a lot of people like Joe Dispenza is a scientist, I think, and professor in America. He's talked about, so I think that's one thing. He was actually recently on Stephen Bartlett, if you listen to his podcast, Diary of a CEO. So that's one thing I do. I make sure, as I said to you, that I'm consuming things that make me feel positive, uplift me, because if it goes back to what we said initially, I mean, you need to be selective and think who's in your world just now, how much time are you spending with people that are making you feel good or that are on a certain wavelength, and it's a difficult thing to do, especially when you start having realizations about you're going through a lot of growth, you want more, and you're having to redefine a lot of things in your life and boundaries. And it's not easy for yourself or others, especially when you're a little bit unclear. But
it's interesting, we had somebody on a podcast earlier that talked about finding your people, and some people are your people and some people aren't your people, and that's okay. It doesn't make that you or them any less, they're just not your people. And I thought that was a really lovely way to put it in terms of what you fill in your life with, so who is it? There are some things that are your things and there's some things that just aren't your things, and it's all right. It doesn't make you any less or those things any less, but in actual fact it's just about recognising, no, that's my thing, they're my people, and that's okay, and I'm okay with that.
Definitely. The words that you use, what you're seeing, what you're listening to. I mean, I have like wee post-its down in the house, my fridge or my shower room window about, you're doing great, just be kind to yourself. And it's also like a wee reminder, or one book that I'm kind of like just now is like The Daily Stoic, getting things from like philosophers and lecturers of back in, I think it was Roman times, and they've got a wee quote a day, but then below that it's actually got translated into, okay, what does this mean in modern day talk? I think just continuously learning, and being open to, and I think I say this all the time, the more I study and the more I know, the more I just realise just how little I actually know, It's like one of them, it's a bottomless...
It sounds as if there's something about being quite intentional in there as well. Because I know, you're saying you go to the gym, so I know that you go to the gym at a ridiculous time in the morning. And so for me it's a ridiculous time in the morning, but so but that's the intentionality in that, isn't it?
I'm quite flexible. I think there's something there being quite adaptable. It goes back to our case of, if I had to do things, I don't live where I need to be places at a certain time and do a lot. It's in the morning, I feel like it sets me up for the day, but within a certain window of a couple of hours, but depending on, I mix things up. If I do my meditation beforehand, to do some exercises, like list before I go to sleep 10 things, well, more than 10 things that I'm grateful for, but the first thing I'll do when I wake up, before I even open my eyes, is think about, okay, what am I grateful for today? Like the opportunity to kind of come here, for instance, was one of them, like just simple things that, are, or being able to kind of stretch, and just feel really quite secure, and it's just those sort of exercises, like the gratitude, it's a vibration. It's kind of thinking about your own energy signature and vibration that you want to build up within yourself. And oh God, there's so many things just boggling our mind that we've been talking about there that
yeah, but definitely about being intentional. If you actually don't set the intention to do it, then the chances of you doing it are probably slim to none.
It's finding your why, I suppose, as well. What's your motivation behind doing it as well, because that will give you more energy and more drive to do something, I suppose. And it goes back to how we've been, we were talking about earlier about where we are in business and what I've been doing. It's having that ability to not be scared to fail at something. And I've people kind of brand or reconfigure that word of failure into, it's just a lesson learned, but own it as failure. Make failure bloody popular, it's a good thing to fail. We're too hung up on whatever, that's what I was going to say, we're too hung up on what other people think. And I think saying that in one instance is quite okay. We all get that. It's not good to kind of value what other people think. But when you actually start looking at the decisions that you make and the things that you're thinking about, you think, am I doing this for me, or am I actually doing it, as a result of how other people might portray it, And that's a similar thing that's happened to me in terms of going through a business venture. Actually, these last couple of weeks, having this almost like recalibration phases, taking that step back from social media, I've loved it. I've always been of that opinion, be more a producer rather than a consumer, because I'm probably one person that I would say, and I have said this, and probably improved quite a lot more on it over time, but I don't consider myself to be a naturally optimistic person. I've been quite someone that's had quite a lot, and that I built up in my mind and being quite critical really of myself, and really not had really good mental health experiences at different points in my life. And so this is why I probably put more emphasis on studying and getting to know things, because I feel that generally you find those people that do start teaching and learn about these things, it's because it's a weakness to them. It's not a strength, it's a weakness. It becomes possibly a strength because they do more and more work. But I think, not even just, we're in this day and age where social media has to be by far something that has a massive impact, and only because people put, everyone's putting on the highlight reels and things, so you're only seeing that. And I think we've touched on that before. And I think you don't want to get caught up on that. You don't, it's nice to support people. It's nice to be there, and actually, if you're supporting their successes and being genuinely happy for them, then that's a good vibration. If you're coming from a point of view of, oh God, look how well they're doing, oh I can't do that, that's just like comparative, in terms of a detrimental way that doesn't help you. So you need to kind of look to see, and I know that myself, what frame of mind are you in? How can you, if you're in a good position to look at that and consume it well, and limit your consumption of it, be selective.
I think it's really interesting the number of folk that we have on this podcast, or that we've had on over the last 2 or 3 years, that have all landed on the social media thing and all said virtually the same thing in terms of the impact. And it's like, so many people are saying it, and you think, my goodness me, why are we not doing something about that? Because it's still a big issue in lots and lots of places. It's a small dopamine hit.
It's like we're constantly, if you put a post out there, then you're getting that small, if you get a like, or I know when I was doing it, I was put a story potentially, and then I would go back and think, okay, who's looked at my story, who's liked it? And I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I getting caught up on that? And again, it goes back to your why. What's your intent? Are you doing the things because you're passionate about them? Are you doing them because you want validation from others? Are you doing it so that you feel that you're successful, or you're actually achieving, And you lose sight, and this is where I find at certain points, you lose sight of why you're doing certain things. you know, and this is where it goes back to maybe it's really important to get clear on what do you value in a week, what do you need, you know, what do you want from your day, your week, your month, your life, you know, what are the things that you're aiming for? And if you don't know, that's okay. It's always, I don't think we need to have it all sussed out. You don't need to know the how, you know, something's going to happen. It's good to just actually be quite creative and think, you know, if you think that carte blanche, nothing's off the table. I know we did talk about saying you didn't need to go for lofty goals, but why not? But totally. Why not? Because, you know, everything is feasible within reality. We just hold ourselves back more so because of our experience of reality and what we think's possible. But we've got so many people that you can go and look at, you know, role models that actually prove that it can be done. If you can, you know, almost like imagine it in your mind, you've already got it. If it's already a thought of something that you can actually visually see, then you know you've got it. You just need to then start getting the intuitive, inspired action to help you get there, and that's incremental, you know, over time.
Yeah, totally. So that final question that we land on with all our podcast guests, if you had a magic wand or some fairy dust or something that you could sprinkle, that you could change one thing in our culture or society that would impact mental and health and well-being positively, then what would that be?
Yeah. Specifically in our society, it's almost that I think we have touched on two approaches. It's that almost like the bonding over the negative, misery loves company. I think there's probably that's probably something that if we found ourselves as, we kind of look at some American people and you think, oh my God, there's something wrong with them. They're kind of like, you know, they're very flamboyant, very happy, very jovial. And I was having this conversation with someone quite recently, and you think, that's quite a drastic, you know, polar opposite in terms of behaviour, you know. I'm not saying that, you know, you should model everything off Americans, but in terms of that culture, that, you know, kind of, you know, language that's used, it's very upbeat, it's very positive, it's very, you know, we're probably a bit more, I don't know, doom and gloom, and we bond over how miserable the weather is. We love to moan about the weather. We love to moan about how poor the weather is, and then we love to moan about how too hot it is, you know, like at some points. So I think that's probably something that would have quite a good shift. But one thing that I'm going to need two magic wands or two wishes. It's like one thing that I've noticed is that it has an impact on a deeper level in terms of our beliefs, our vibrations, the frequency that we have within ourselves, you know, in terms of the language that we use. Because I mean, there's like scientists and people in America that are, you know how, you know, you can make yourself ill or sick based upon your thoughts, like people get ulcers or whatever it may be, or just headaches because they're stressed, and it's about the thoughts that they're thinking. But then they have like leukemia units, you know, in America, and they have thought therapists and doctors that are having people go in and cure themselves solely within their minds, you know. And that whole idea of the placebo effect, I think we're a little bit, the John Keogh and others talk about this, we're a little bit in the Stone Age in terms of where we are with medical science and what we actually don't realise is possible within our consciousness, and how we can actually help cure ourselves, you know, of a lot of the things that we're struggling with. So yeah, I think, but as a natural kind of starting point, it's about maybe making sure that we're become a little bit kinder, more so to ourselves, and, you know, something that I've done is, you know, and as training, you know, literally do, you can't just, it's not positive thinking, it is training. You need to work on your mind and build up strategies that help you become someone that looks at life, yourself, those and the people around you, in a more, not just positive, but just in a healthier regard, you know, in a more abundant state, you know.
Yeah. What a fabulous place to land. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure there'll be tons of stuff in there that people will get loads from and that will really interest them. Folks will be jumping on the authors and all the different ones that you had mentioned. If you've been watching this and you've enjoyed it and you think you could do what Ross has just done, then please do get in touch with us. Drop us a message on whichever social media channel you're watching this on, or drop us a wee email email or even use a phone, and you can phone us and talk to us or come in and see us. Our address is on our website, which is www.healingfortheheart.co.uk, and you can come and join me and have a chat about mental health and well-being on our podcast, People Just Like Us.